Tonight, we're talking about history's failed revolutions and what they can teach us today. Still with us, Robert Gallately and Andrew Roberts and David Horowitz. Andrew, I want to come to you before we go to David. I got a lot of heat here in America for saying that radicals, Islamists, communists, socialists, labor unions from all over the world are working together, even though they don't agree with each other on everything, to destabilize and start revolutions. And that's what happened in the Middle East. And it started with Tunisia and then Egypt and Libya, and it's headed all over the Middle East. Do you think that's a crazy conspiracy theory?
No, I certainly don't think it's a crazy conspiracy theory at all. If these organisations want the same thing, then of course it's in their interests to work together. They won't necessarily work together in the same way that you would expect Democrats to. They won't necessarily even have to communicate much with one another. But the fact is that if they want the same thing, they will go out and get it. And we see that again and again in history. And also the other thing that's terribly unimportant is numbers. You don't need large numbers to create a revolution. Sometimes, like the Bolsheviks, the very word Bolshevik in Russian means minority. They can always be very small numbers starting these huge and disastrous historical phenomena.
And doesn't that work actually to their advantage? Because people dismiss them. They dismiss them.
That, and also they can stay organised. They can have a central series of commands which are unquestionably obeyed in the way that a large mass movement often can't have.
What are you seeing in Egypt and in the Middle East? Where do you think this?
Well, I'm seeing.
Where do you think this ends?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm seeing the Muslim Brotherhood, of course, in Egypt, which is an extremely unpleasant and vicious, ideologically vicious organisation, also well organised. As I mentioned earlier, you get this with the Jacobins, you get this with the Bolsheviks, and you also, of course, got it with the Khomeini revolution in 1979 in Iran. You have these people who are driven with various ideological beliefs that go into other countries. Libya, for example, quite recently, Colonel Gaddafi was accused of being a Jew. That was the worst thing that his so-called democratic opponents, his so-called moderate opponents, were able to say about him. You see, the anti-Semitism is a classic telltale sign that you get across revolutions and across history. You had the
National Socialist in Germany bond with the Islam.
Only 2.3% of the population in 1923. There were very, very few of them, but it didn't mean that they weren't able, of course, as you mentioned, with anti-Semitism, to create the German Revolution. The Bolsheviks also were monstrously anti-Semitic.
And in Germany, the fascists linked with the communists. They didn't work together, but they had the same purpose of revolution, a workers' revolution, right, Robert?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then go ahead.
No, exactly that, and you found that although, of course, they hated each other, and ultimately this was to be seen in the attack of Operation Barbarossa on the 22nd of June 1941 when Hitler invaded Russia, actually both of them were working very hard to undermine the Weimar state from within.
Yes. Now, I want to take you someplace. We were just talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, but now we have this. We have Muslim Brotherhood here in America, and we have radicals here in America, and they would like to have America be theirs. But there's also the labor unions, which surprisingly look an awful lot like the International Socialist Organization. This is AFL-CIO. This is the International Socialist Organization. You tell me what the difference is here besides color and the star. We'll do that next with David Horowitz. We're back with Robert Gallately and Andrew Roberts, and now David Horowitz. David, I know you don't have, I don't think Fox goes to L.A. They don't let it in L.A., so you can't see these, but I'm holding them up. And one is the International Socialist Organization logo, and the other is the AFL-CIO Stand with Wisconsin logo, they're identical. Would you guys agree they're identical?
Well,
yeah,
well of
they're
course,
identical.
the socialist radical left took over the AFL-CIO years ago.
So when
and I think your statement that the international left, including the unions, is working in the same direction with the Islamic jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood is the truest thing that anybody has said about the crisis in the Middle East. I wanted to say, you hear people saying America has to get on the right side of history. And you have to ask yourself, you know, would you have wanted to be on the right side of history in 1917, which led to the slaughter of 40 million people, or in China in 1949, or in Germany in 1933, or in Iran in 1979 when the Ayatollah came to power, or in Cuba in 1959? Progressives have this idea that history is a forward march, and that just around the corner there is a better world, and a miraculously better world. And that's why when they get power, they kill so many people.
David,
it's obviously false. If that were true, the 20th century would have been the best century. And actually, from the point of view of human rights and the murder of innocents, the 20th century is the worst century in the history of mankind. So be careful before you stabilize or applaud the destabilization of a whole region,
okay, David,
such as is happening now.
Let me talk to you a little bit about here in America. People, dismiss communists and socialists because they're like, oh, well, they're just a bunch of clowns, which I think works to their advantage because, as we have talked, it's always a very small minority that, that makes it happen. And people can't believe, labor union members can't believe that they're in with a communist. I'm not in with the communists. That's not what's...
The mentality.
Whoops.
Glenn.
Yes.
In Wisconsin, you see these labor union members beating tom-toms inside of a Democratic elected house, preventing them from doing their work, and chanting, "The people united will never be defeated." In other words, anybody who disagrees with them is against the people, an enemy of the people. This is a totalitarian mentality, which is not to say that every member of the union is a totalitarian, but the leaders are socialists, and they want to control everybody,
but they'll
and
say,
they don't want dissent.
What they'll say, if I was the average union worker, I'll say, look, I'm not for revolution. I'm not a communist, and it's just the leadership, and it's no big deal. We're not going to go all communist on it. We're not going to have a revolution.
Well, you know, how about respecting the vote that was held in November and being civil about it? When union members will stand up, and I'm sure there are plenty who do, stand up for civility, for respecting the election, for, you know, organizing to win the next election, but not obstructing, not shutting down a democratic body, you know, then I'll be persuaded. Right now, these public sector unions are the most left-wing unions in America. They're run by 60s radicals.
And are they connected? Are they connected to the revolutions and the uprisings now, even in India? Those are labor unions.
Absolutely, they're international organizations. There are all these radicals, you know, who are organized in things like ACORN and now whatever Wade Rafke calls his international organization.
Right.
The left is always international minded. They're not patriotic. They don't believe in nation states, and they're looking for a world revolution that's going to bring that better world that's around the corner.
When we come back,
it's a religious. It's a crypto religion. They believe in a redemption of the world. And the dangerous thing is that they see themselves as the redeemers. So they will do anything to achieve their ends.
Final few minutes here with Robert Galately, Andrew Roberts, and David Horowitz. But when we were in the break, I gave each of them 30 seconds, and I said, tell the American people one thing. If you don't want to repeat history, what is the one thing you must do? Robert?
I would say the first thing you should do and keep on doing is watch out for civil and legal rights. These are the precious things that are the first things dictators get rid of. Particularly, I would emphasize freedom of the press. The first right, the first privilege, whatever you want to call it, that Lenin got rid of after he took power, his first order was to silence the opposition press. Okay. It was no accident.
All right. Andrew.
For me, it would be just, you've got to stick to your basic instincts. You've got to keep all those gut things that made America great in the first place, that allowed you to defeat this parliament that I'm sitting in front of.
And we'll do it again if you don't watch yourself.
You've got to stick to your Constitution. It's an incredible document, a God-given document, and you really must hold on to it.
Okay. And David.
The greatest bulwark against a totalitarian future is the First Amendment, which is under assault at the UN globally by the Islamists, who are to make any criticism of Islamic terror blasphemy and outlawed, and domestically by the left and its doctrine of political correctness, where if you are critical of Palestinian terrorists or Islamic terrorists, you will be shut down because people will charge you with offending a religion or offending an ethnicity. Of course, offending Jews or Christians, that's okay.
All right.
But that's the way they do it.
Right.
And they will shut down your free speech. That's what's happening in Wisconsin.
I think
panel,
they
are trying to nullify a vote and to nullify a legislature.
I think
the second thing I would say is take away the political power of government unions.
All right. David, I got to run. I thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. We'll be back in just a second. The program tonight was that revolutions are ugly. They may sound great at the beginning, but they're really not. And they don't always end the way you think they do. In fact, they usually don't. It's the best organized that win. From New York, good night, America.